play that in the background. Do that on my end. And we'll use the second computer to make sure that it works. Just want to make sure you can still hear me now.
I can.
Yeah. Okay. We're doing a big push this month for a lot of these, certainly this new show and a lot of things because it's Mental Health Awareness Month.
Yeah.
And I know Tiltify wanted to do a spotlight on us this month.
That's cool.
So we're really pushing it hard.
So how long are your episodes?
I think we did hour and a half.
Hour and a half. Okay. Well, I can get started. I'm going to close this Word document and stop worrying about it. This is what we call temporary defeat. But little does this paragraph know, 11 p.m., I'm going to destroy it.
Exactly.
Oh, I'm going to refill my coffee. I have a pot already brewed, and I'm almost empty, so I'll be right back.
Sure.
All right. Are there
Back.
show notes or anything that you need to share, or do I just need to respond to you and it'll be fine?
Probably be fine. As if that way, just have a bunch of questions.
Okay.
Okay, just want to make sure that everything's working. Okay, word comes up. Let's switch this over here. Hello and welcome, everyone. Oh, I'm getting some feedback. I'm trying to figure out what that is. There. Nope, that is not it. What is the feedback here? That work?
1 second.
Nope. Okay, I think. Nope, that's not it. This one? Nope. I'm trying to figure out where that feedback's coming from. That work? That work? Nope. Technology is hard at times.
The microphone stuff is the hardest part of broadcasting
Yeah, I'm just
anything.
getting a feedback from my headset back from my voice, but well, we can make it work.
Oh, that means that your headset, the sound that's going into your ears, is also entering your microphone.
Oh, possibly. Let me open up the.
So if you lower the volume on your headset,
We'll see what the chat says.
is your Twitch window muted?
Yeah, it's just having a second PC for now.
Okay.
Well, everything is fine on stream, so we'll make do.
What is the channel that this is broadcasting on?
So it's streaming on the Guardians MH channel.
Yeah, I'm trying to find it. I
So
really
it's
thought it
twitch.tv/GuardiansMH.
found it. Right, yeah, I see
So
it.
we'll see if Matt can join. If he can, um, if he can't, that's fine. For those that are listening, Matt wanted to be here tonight, but he's having a situation with work. So we wish him the best and to get this situation resolved.
We have just turned into Discord.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I forgot about the window capture.
Yeah.
Let's see if that fixes itself. Streaming is
We're good.
hard.
It is.
Yeah. So, hello everyone. Just for starters, the information presented in this discussion is of a general nature and is intended for educational and entertainment purposes. While many of the people here have various forms of mental health training, they are not your mental health professional. This discussion is not a replacement for mental or physical care or for the diagnosis of any mental health illness or condition. So, hello everyone, and thank you again for joining us for A Healer's Journey. This is a new show with Guardians MH for our podcast. I am one of your hosts, Dr. Goku, and unfortunately my co host Matt is unable to join us tonight. Guardians MH is a 501c3 nonprofit focused on promoting mental health awareness throughout the gaming community. We strive to be a first step in assisting individuals with gathering meaningful resources in a safe and inclusive atmosphere. A healer's journey is just another way for us to normalize talking about mental health with other mental health professionals discussing their journey in becoming a mental health professional and their unique abilities to help clients through their most challenging times. So tonight with us, I have the honor of welcoming Dr. Gameology. How are you doing, Dr. Gameology? Or do you prefer
I'm
Dr. Kaufman,
doing
Daniel? What do you prefer?
haha, that's a really good question. Sometimes I don't know the answer to that particular question itself. I am Dr. Gameology, but I'm also all those other things as well, Daniel and Dr. Kaufman and all of that. So um, I guess on the internet I'm Dr. Gameology, but
Oh,
there's another Dr. K that operates in a lot of the same spaces, so that could get brand confusion, I guess. So it's
there's more and
whatever.
more mental health professionals that are entering the gaming space that I've been seeing over the past years.
Yeah, it's an interesting problem, and uh, it's an interesting path to overcoming many different problems as well. And for me, I find that video games actually enter into therapy sessions far more often as a pathway for understanding ourselves better and motivating ourselves to have better self esteem or confidence in the face of our issues. But then again, I do a lot of sessions for people that perhaps are overplaying or are using video games as a fun and permanent diversion from some of the challenges that really would be beneficial for them to overcome. So I get to see both sides of it on a pretty regular basis, actually.
So, for the people that might not know who you are, could you tell us a little bit more about who you are and what you do?
Yeah, so my name is Dr. Daniel Kaufman. I'm an assistant professor at Grand Canyon University in their clinical mental health counseling program. I have a doctorate in counselor education and supervision. And my research started looking at personality theory and originally looking at it using the Myers-Briggs type indicator, which is a instrument that I personally love, but I love all personality instruments, and a lot of people don't. A lot of
Mm-hmm.
people dig their heels in and decide that there is supposedly one instrument to rule them all, one ring to find them. It's like the One Ring, but
Mm-hmm.
personality instruments.
I
I
mean,
don't
I
see it
use a
that way.
variety of them in my own clinical work. I don't personally use the Myers Briggs just because of
Right.
the type of work that I do, but I can see the usefulness for a lot of people just having that typography of kind of understanding of who they are and this shared language.
Right. And my most recent research involves the five factor inventory. Instead, I really wanted to be able to silence the criticism of what particularly I'm talking about with games because you say Myers Briggs type indicator, and everything that you've just identified as a significant result using the other instruments like the MPOGQ to look at gaming motivations, it's people just get distracted by the four letters MBTI.
Mm.
So I thought it would be really interesting to me, actually, since I didn't choose the MBTI to insult people. Uh, I chose it because a member of my dissertation committee was a part of their institute. So why would I not choose that one? And so, I found a lot of similar findings with a different MMORPG. So the two that I've researched so far are Star Wars: The Old Republic and Final Fantasy 14 Online. I did the Myers Briggs type indicator with the SWOTOR players, and I did the 5-factor inventory with the Final Fantasy 14 people. And the findings are pretty close to the same thing. It's it's more of a reflection on how the games use their structural variables differently to impact the flow of the game experience for the player. And so those are the things that I'm really fascinated by always. I really love looking at the principle of psychological flow, which originates from all the work Mihai Csikszentmihalyi did on the way that we play a lot of games, or the way we mentally meld into different activities with our balance of challenge and skill, things like tennis or chess or rock climbing, ballet dancing, things where it really does suit you to do things exceptionally well, but without having to think about them, that you psychologically become the activity. And there are certain things in video games where that happens as well. So all of these things are the things that I'm always up for joining another research study and contributing sections and paragraphs in literature review and helping get that across the finish line. Uh,
Because
so
when I was
I'm
writing my own thesis, there wasn't a lot of this type of research done. It's only been the last 5, 10 years or so
mhm.
that I've been seeing more and more researchers looking at games and looking at the positive aspects of games, because we've always heard, mainly in the 90s, that moral panic with video games and violent video games, but never really how it can really benefit people.
Yeah, that whole timeline aspect is something I think about all the time. One of the, I guess it was a meme I must have seen on Twitter or Instagram years and years ago, and it was a simple statement just saying all the years of the world existing, across all of space and time, right? And we're alive at the part of existence where Star Wars exists,
Mm,
right? And that might seem like a really narrow mindset to have, but it doesn't really matter if it's Star Wars, or if we're saying that we happen to be alive at the time that the National Football League exists, or we happen to be alive at the time that carbonated soda exists, Monopoly exists, the board game.
mm.
Um, you
Well, we can say
know,
something else with that, but we'll stick with the board game.
Instagram, Spotify, like whatever it is that gives you joy in life. None of these things in the grand scheme of things has existed for very long. So you take someone who used to just be a, unassuming lower middle class kid in farm country Illinois, who's just excited to play Super Mario Brothers 3 on an NES. And I got to finish high school and college and my master's and my doctorate at the exact moments of, Knights of the Old Republic, getting installed on my first college laptop, and then games like Heavy Rain teaching me about grief and loss while I'm learning about them in psychopathology as a master's student. And then, SWOTOR launches my first semester of my doc program. And I've always loved Star Wars. It has been hard the last several years, but I still love Star Wars.
On that day, may the fourth be with you.
That's right, that is today. So whenever you're listening to the episode of the show, we're talking on May the 4th. And it does appear maybe we want to up your volume
Oh, let me see if I can.
according to the chat. Just want to add
Let
that
me
in
up
here.
that, and hopefully that works.
Okay. Um, yeah, so, I've always loved Star Wars. And so Star Wars in video games has been really big for me. And, those are the things that really led to me figuring out, oh, I could research things that I actually think are cool.
I remember when I did my pitch for my doctoral thesis, and the school that I went to was very in the box in terms of what they wanted to do. The very cognitive based, or some working on mindfulness. And I brought this idea to my thesis supervisor, which was these parasocial relationships and how they can be positive things for people. And he had never heard of a parasocial relationship and the impact of fictional characters can have on people. And the spiel that I gave him was, so many people use, what would Jesus do? And I flipped it with, what would Spider-Man do? And that just clicked for him.
Nice.
And he didn't know a thing about them, and we worked together. And many years later, and many hardships later, we finally got through it.
Yeah, I think that having people in your academic program that get your idea and see themselves as a person who's tasked with supporting you and pushing you into that idea effectively, that's so important because I've had friends, I've seen it happen to students where, for whatever reason, it's very easy for faculty to get confused about what they're in that building to accomplish, and they just become such awful obstacles, and can shut down amazing ideas for projects because it's it's too painful for them to not understand an idea.
Mhm.
And cognitive behavioral approaches, I think, really actually nurture that superiority limitation where, if you really believe that theory and only that theory, um, it's kind of hard to do imaginative things with you.
It's very formulaic.
Hmm.
And when I started as a clinician, I was really, oh, well, here's my CBT manual, and here's kind of the protocols, because very green and very
That's a
nervous.
good place for all of us to start, honestly, because it prevents us from making stupid mistakes.
Mhm. But now it's just looking at the client, hearing the client, is not like picking and choosing from these different approaches to make this own style that works for that particular individual.
Hmm.
And I think it's one thing I really like with geek therapy and bringing in new media as these reference points for people where they can really relate. One thing
Yeah.
I'm doing my certification with geek therapeutics for geek therapists, and your module on journey really hit home for me because it touched on that hero's journey and kind of going through these steps and reflecting it to my own journey of becoming a mental health professional. So I wanted to ask you, what was your journey in becoming a mental health professional?
Yeah. Um, so before we lose the opportunity for me to add this in, the first time I played Journey is not when it was a new game. It slipped through my awareness the way so many games did when I was a doc student. And then it became either on sale or maybe the PS Plus game um, when I was about 2 weeks away from submitting my first full draft of my dissertation. So I played it knowing that if I sit down and work on chapter 4 and 5 for 10 hours, this is it. It's over. Right. So being on the verge of that and knowing I'm on the verge of that, and then adding that game into my psyche, it it did something that I can't even really put into the right words. I would just say, like, it basically changed everything about what I think I was going to become upon completing that dissertation. And I didn't realize it at the time because you don't notice things like that. But you just keep going back to that game. And, so, the hero's journey is something also that I published a paper on. It didn't have any data or anything. It was just the counseling profession or helping professions for us, it's the hero's journey. We live in our ordinary world looking around and saying, people are not doing well. There are professions that are designed to help these people because they're not doing well. If I wanted to do one of those Twitter games where it's like, describe your occupation poorly, um, I get paid to talk to people and be sort of like their friend with smart ideas for an hour. You know, Sometimes I don't even have to offer good ideas. I just have to ask questions that deliberately force them to keep talking. And that feels like support. That feels like friendship. That feels intellectual. That feels challenging. Whatever I'm hoping they feel, I hope I can be a small part in that happening. And so I feel like we are all a part of that before we even start getting educated. So I could start the whole question of how did I end up being a counselor? Like, I could start at 10 years old. That's when I really, uh, in a in a literal way, started understanding psychologists exist. Um, Not of course, when you're a 10-year-old and you start realizing psychologists exist, that's not usually a very happy situation. So, I think though, because of the purpose of our story, I would like to try to talk about that in as unfiltered a way as possible. Um, Nothing really traumatic for me is in here, but I just hope everyone listening is in a good state to kind of just realize that ugly things occur in reality. Um, so in my elementary school or maybe middle school, so maybe I was 11 or so. I'd always been told that I was a good listener and I was wise. Like, church going kid from my upbringing. People like to proclaim that you have wisdom, right? That's if you're not athletic enough to get praised for your physical attributes, then it's like, well, your brain works really well.
It's one or the
Um,
other.
right. So I sort of, as a child, was like looking at, well, I want to be an astronaut. No, I want to be an NBA player. And then I started to realize those two things are probably not going to happen. And then someone in my grade ended their life by suicide. And so we had an entire day of the school day that was all about that in my small little town. And So that is a really actually important part of me starting to kind of understand what mental health professionals do. And it was such a small town, we didn't get to see any of them or anything, but there were little things here and there about making sure that we're okay that started to happen. And so then, you know, we moved across the country because of my dad's job. And so I settled in Florida, and that's where I am now. And that's the first state where I became licensed as a mental health counselor eventually later in the story. So I got to do middle school and high school just south of Orlando. And in high school, I took AP psychology. As a sophomore, I actually took a general high school version of psychology, and then I started taking electives for the peer mediator program where kids would fight in the cafeteria, and instead of getting suspended, they talk to me for 10 minutes and list 3 things they'll do differently to not let it happen again and avoid suspension.
It's like the early
Uh,
frameworks of peer support.
yeah, exactly. Yeah. So I did those classes as one of my electives every single semester. So, 2 semesters a year for junior and senior year. And also, that doubled as me getting to grade the general psychology tests that the students would do, like grade the multiple choice, make sure they drew the lines to connect terminology to, like, Sigmund Freud, founder of psychoanalysis. So I'd have to make sure they drew the Sigmund Freud line to psychoanalysis instead of like something else.
And that's
Um,
one thing I wish my high school had, because in a small-ish part of Canada, which is a very large country, and
uh-huh.
my high school didn't have any psychology classes.
Hmm.
We have like basic sociology, but that was like extremely basic. The For me, I learned psychology through other means, but I only started to learn really kind of the fundamentals of it was during undergrad.
Oh, sure. Yeah, I was very lucky to go to the specific high school that I went to. Even going to a different high school in the same county, that the butterfly effect of that
Hmm.
terrifies me. Uh, um, so I got to do that and, was very successful in AP psychology. I loved that class and decided more and more that, well, I'm going to be a psychologist. And one of the things that still is part of my journey is I told my teacher in AP psychology, I'm going to write part of these textbooks one day, and that's how people are going to know me. The textbook thing hasn't happened yet, but there are a lot of things that I've actually done to this point where I feel like I did that,
It might be
you
more
know?
than just the textbook.
Right, right. And so that's this is going to be so incredibly out of sequence if I tell it the way I want to. Kind of like Dr. Manhattan's recollection of the timeline in The Watchmen, which is one of my favorite things ever, by the way. But you have to understand Dr. Manhattan
Mhm,
and just decide I'm going to enjoy thinking about time that way,
mhm.
because I cannot tell you how many times I've tried to do a timeline with someone like that, and they think that I have lost my mind.
Well, it's like thinking of the
Um,
MCU, watching it in the release order rather than watching chronologically.
oh, sure, absolutely.
And it's those,
Or
oh, I
watching,
remember that,
yeah.
and bringing it back here, and it just brings a form of enjoyment in my eyes.
Yeah, actually, you know what? Star Wars probably taught me to have that kind of cognitive flexibility as well.
Mhm.
The prequel trilogy comes out right when I moved to Florida, um, and teaches me that 1 comes after 6.
Mhm. And now
So,
we have Kenobi coming out shortly that I can't wait
oh,
for.
man.
The
Did you
new
see the
trailer
trailer
dropped today,
today?
and oh my god, we can nerd out for like a half hour just on Star Wars after this for sure.
Yeah, we absolutely could. One of the things that I have been talking about seriously for over 15 years, back to Revenge of the Sith time, is everyone would be talking about how it lines up so perfectly with the originals. And I have always been, yes, it does, except for the line in Return of the Jedi where Darth Vader says, Obi-Wan once thought as you do. And so, like, I'm getting ready to watch Kenobi at the end of this month. I'm really interested to see if something will happen that makes me feel like now every single line of dialogue connects.
It just makes sense now because they're
Yeah.
weaving things in. Same way with like the Book of Boba Fett and how
Uh-huh.
they're weaving in Luke and kind of the new
Yeah.
Jedi Order.
The scene with Luke and Ahsoka at the bottom of the hill that we see burning in the sequel trilogy with the Ben Solo betrayal.
Mhm.
But it's vibrant, it's growing, it's life. That's just such a neat connective thread. Like you're taking Clone Wars and you're taking Luke Skywalker, um, but not like the bad ending of the hero's journey, Luke
Mhm.
Skywalker. Like I actually do like his ending, by the way, in The
Mhm.
Last Jedi. It's the one thing about The Last Jedi that I don't question if the assignment was understood. Um, but the in counseling, sometimes we get to work with people who are in different phases of their development.
Mhm.
And I really like Erickson's framework for the developmental stages, for example. So, Luke Skywalker, uh, the way he is in The Last Jedi is very much like crisis of faith kind of clients where like maybe they've had a certain religion their entire life and something happens that just breaks the whole thing.
It makes me think of a
And
client I had a couple of years ago. I had this before the pandemic, where she grew up in a very highly religious, almost Mormon community, and she
mhm,
left the faith, started university, and was completely lost and out of her element.
mhm,
So it's this crisis
yeah,
of what do I do now?
yeah. And if we don't go the religion path to explain that, it also happens with career choices as well. You spend 20 years of your life uh, believing on an identity level that this work is what you were meant to be, and then something breaks that, and you just hate everything about it now bitterly. And so I don't really have a problem with that. That direction for Luke is actually really interesting to me, and I like the book more because my brain can like make it work
Mm,
in a way that on the screen. Like, I just felt like there were a lot of things going on in that movie. I don't think talking about The Last Jedi is the best use of our podcast episode, actually.
but we're talking about journey. We're talking about kind of Luke's
Yeah,
journey, and but
yeah.
with your journey going through like undergrad and grad school, how were your experiences? Because every every mental health professional that I've talked with have gone to different schools and different programs and different theoretical approaches. but we kind of
Yeah.
all meet at this same singular point, even though we might view things a little bit differently. So how was
Sure,
your
yeah.
experience through school?
Yeah, so going into undergrad, I majored in psychology and I did student assistant work in the psychology department. So I was in the psychology department, making copies, scoring scantrons, making coffee for people, um, every day, Monday through Friday, while I wasn't in class. And that led to me bonding really closely with the newest professor that was there for all of my time in undergrad for all 3 years. Um, and he was like his emphasis was neuroscience. So I started to really appreciate the way the brain works and the way that all the cognitive processes that we have interact with the biological
Mm,
processes. And so even though I decided upon graduation to go the counseling path, and some of that was because of what programs can I attend that that I can stay local. And it was sort of explained to me in undergrad that if I want to do sessions with people and help them that way, then counseling is absolutely what I can
mm,
pursue. That going for clinical psychology would be more assessment and testing and things like that.
mm.
I don't
A
know if
little bit
that
of both.
advice was necessary. Yeah, exactly. But as it turns out, I got to do the counseling, so I started my master's program. Um, did very well there. Formed a really strong bond with the person that you take all the classes in the whole program from, except for 7 of them, right?
Mm,
Like, so it was one of those programs where you have 2 full-time people, but one of them only teaches 2 different classes. So, the other one teaches you the entire program except for your electives. And so I formed a really good bond with that
mm.
professor, to the point where I still go back and teach in his addiction class a 2 or 3-hour lecture every single year. Um, and that streak is almost at 10 years now
Wow.
since I started sort of carving out my niche in the field of what it is I talk about, related to first. So I'm getting ahead of myself. So I finished my master's program. I did my internship at a community mental health center in my hometown in Florida. So Illinois is done. Like there's nothing for
Mm,
me there. And then so I'm in Florida still. I get hired during my internship, which is really nice. Um, and then about a month goes by after that where I think I'm done with school. And then uh the city that I grew up in is extremely like being bilingual would have been an extremely good personal quality to have. The ability to speak English and Spanish would have served my career aspirations very well. Um, but I realized because of a couple unfortunate conversations uh, in the program that hired me that I'm not going anywhere because I don't speak Spanish. And there's, the clients, the the spoken language split at this place is too dramatically skewed to justify any kind of advancement opportunities for people that don't speak Spanish. So I was faced with a decision at that point. I can learn Spanish or I could go become better educated than all the people in this building that make the decisions like
mm.
that.
That's a
And so,
a good way to see things.
well, yeah, I think a lot of people in hindsight would have just learned Spanish. That would have been much easier, I think, because having multiple languages that you speak is something that is a given in most places in the world, and it would have been a talent that would have been useful. I think about this all the time. Like the alternate timeline thing is just something that I really love. Um, and it
The
just so
multiverse.
happens, well, yes, it just so happens that around the end of my master's program, I started watching Doctor Who. And this is actually really important. the the idea that I could be a doctor started, like, once I had that thought, I couldn't let it go. So I started collecting information about doc programs, and I applied to one, would have been in Virginia. I flew out, did their whole weekend thing, got a letter that said, "Not this year. Uh, thanks for thinking about us." And that was the first time anything didn't go my way, my entire story, right? Um,
When we look
so
at like the academics, getting into like a master's program is one thing, but getting into a doctoral program, whether it, for me it was a PsyD and some others or PhDs,
right.
it's hyper competitive.
I had no idea it was either, so this letter blindsided me. Like, the idea that I can't get into a program that I applied for, um, I know what I sound like right now. I'm just sharing the honest truth. I went through stuff that weekend. Game of Thrones had just come out, and I didn't know what it was. And so there were 4 episodes sitting there for me. And I got this letter and I just watched all 4 of them. And I thought Jon Snow and, um, and, like I thought Jon Snow was 2 different people, right? Like, no, I thought 2 different people were both Jon Snow. It was, oh my gosh, I'm so upset about this story that I can't remember the name of the king in the north that gets killed at the Red Wedding. Spoilers. And he's in the Eternals as an actor. Well, actually, Jon Snow's in the Eternals too. They're both in the Eternal. I thought they were the same person. Anyway, I was so distraught over this rejection. Um, So then I, of course, went back to work on Monday, and I told the person I share an office with at the mental health center, and she went to Barry University for her master's and said they have a doc program. I'm sure you would get in. And so I was like all negative because now my perfect self has been shattered. I'm like, you can't just assume I'm going to get in. This is really hard. But I applied. 3 days later, one of the professors called me, set up an interview, um, and I did get in. So then I joined my doc program, and then Star Wars: The Old Republic launched finally after 4 years or so of development. Well, publicly being known to be in development. And so that was my first MMORPG, and I created my character after completing my first doc program paper. And I really love my doc program, by the way. The professors there were no page totals or word count expectations for any assignments. They were just like, when it's done, you turn it in.
That's almost
And
even more stressful at times where it's the when is it done?
right, my first paper was 43 pages, which is double spaced, APA format. So it's not,
It takes up space.
yeah, it's not terrible, but when you think your entire master's program, the longest thing you ever turned in was 21 pages. And now I'm doing, 40-page papers routinely. And I loved it. I really did. I thought, now if I find the research that makes this a compelling conversation, and it's not fluff. And I give this to my professor and I say, everything in here is part of my review of that topic. And so I found a topic, that I was working on the entire second half of that first semester, and it was on just counseling applications for MMORPGs. And it was really just me being excited about SWOTOR coming out in
How could you
December
just
and
blend the
never
two together?
right, and I'd never played an MMORPG before. So I actually was learning about what these games are and what I can look forward to, because this is going to be KOTOR 3, right? Knights of the Old
Mhm.
Republic. And then there's Knights of the Old Republic 2, and those were both games I played on my PC during undergrad. And then there is no third one. BioWare shifted completely and went into, we're going to make an MMO that's in the Old Republic part of the Star Wars timeline. And then I'm reading this article about the psychological qualities of massively multiplayer online role playing games, and it was published by Barnett and Colson. And this article still is like it's important enough to me that I'm still just name dropping it. It's it's not it's not a data driven publication. It's just, hey, psychologists, if you wanted to know what an MMORPG is,
Mhm.
here it is in your language with your kinds of section headings and your types of references. And it it really just hit home, guilds and griefing and raiding and leveling up and role playing game and min maxing. And it just, that article not only made my paper work, but it allowed me in my second semester to say, Star Wars The Old Republic is crazy fun. I really think that we need to create a personality taxonomy for MMORPG players. And I think SWOTOR is going to be big enough that that would be a really good dissertation in 3 or 4 years when I get that far. Well, SWOTOR became what it is
Mhm.
as an MMO. But, um,
But the
you
research
know,
stands.
it's true. Yeah. So, fast forwarding through all the classes, every single class, we would have these presentations, we'd have these papers, and I would take the purpose of the paper and the purpose of the presentation, and I do the video game reason that counselors should need to know that. And so it just we got to the dissertation phase of the program, and so I reached out to some podcasts that cover the Star Wars The Old Republic community. I looked up all of them. I made a spreadsheet, who are the hosts, what are their Twitter handles, how often do they post episodes, what's their tone, and kind of created a list of where I thought I might have a good shot of getting some participants. And the podcast, my entire doc program that I listened to the most actually quit right before I hit dissertation. And so I had to expand my list, and I found UtiniCast. And UtiniCast was had two hosts. One was very serious sounding and from Australia, and the other was more lighthearted and responsive and in the Pacific Northwest. And so I reached out on Twitter one day, and I remember where I was. We were at the Tampa Bay Science Center. They have an IMAX there, and we were there to do the Science Center and then see Batman versus Superman on the IMAX, which I hadn't seen yet. So the
It's
only
not
time
as
I saw
bad as
that,
people give a rating for. It's enjoyable, and the whole warehouse scene just sold the movie for me. So,
yeah, I enjoyed the movie actually, and it was much shorter than The Batman.
mhm.
And I actually think that that's really important because movies should have an editor. Um, but I did enjoy The Batman also. I just think that the striving for perfection in cinema is not often found by making movies that just keep every scene in. Except for the coolest one with the Joker playing Hannibal Lecter. That would have been anyway, whatever. I'm getting distracted. Within seconds of me sending the inquiry to can I come on the show or send you an audio clip of me talking about what I was doing, the host from Australia jumped on it and said, "Tell me a little bit more about what you're doing." And so then I got to go on the show. And then that it happened so fast. I didn't think I was going to get a quick response at all. So I still had 3 months before IRB. So, you know, the institutional review board that gives you clearance to actually do the research. So I went on the show and I was just like, this is something I will be doing. And hopefully everyone that needs to say okay and green lights it says okay and green lights it, and we can do this in the summer. So then it did happen that way. We did it in the summer, and I got over 500 participants that answered all questions.
Wow, that's
um,
good.
yeah, for a PhD research study dissertation, that was amazing. And actually, the feedback I got during my defense at the end of that year, it was a really quick turnaround. I changed my job actually so that I'd have less responsibility. I made less money, but so that I could finish my dissertation and spend portions of my day with that being the thing that I needed to do. Um, so one of the best pieces of feedback I got from my defense is that, you know, my study was solid, but the whole way that I made it happen is worth going and talking to doc students about that. You know, motivate, activating. You know, the community of the game. Some of the biggest um, content creators for the game made little videos that showed what happens when you click my link and encourage their followings to do the study. And it was a long study. It was the full Form M of the MBTI. It was the full motivation for play of online games questionnaire. And I actually asked about 30 questions about their own character creation choices and their own activity selection in SWOTOR. So it took time to sit down and do this. And I will forever be gracious or grateful to the SWOTOR community, its players, the year of 2016 for
It's
helping
one
me
thing
complete that.
that I've noticed within the gaming communities is if you give them something that they're passionate about, like someone doing a positive research on a game that they love, they will spend the time. They will respond positively.
I agree 1,000%. I think that what I've seen more than anything else is that game players are interested in psychology, wanting to understand the process of playing games better. They are not as happy about the idea that video games can be a problem.
Mm,
Um, and so, to that, I would just say that there are counselors that have the wrong idea about video games for sure. I look at it more like it's an alcohol situation. Don't drink and drive. Have acceptable amounts in your system at any given time. Rest yourself when you need to so you can get back to being at the right level for your next activities. Video games can fit into anybody's life as long as you're paying attention to what that life continues to be. And so there are reckless uses of video games, playing until 5 a.m. when you have a final exam at 8 a.m.
Maybe not the best
is
of
not
ideas.
not the best choice, right? And so, that's not a specific video game's fault, right? I think that that's what this whole conversation ends up being about. So I'm a mental health professional and I treat people who make bad decisions with their video games. Um, but that's not the specific video game's fault. Like if that student fails their final exam and it was Elden Ring they were playing, Elden Ring is not evil, right? Well, it is, but for
For different reasons.
completely for reasons that they're totally aiming for, right? By the way, I love Elden Ring. I know that that's like circulating all the psychologists probably that we get to talk to, but it is just so devastating that I love the world, and every little new weapon that you earn is just so gratifying
Mhm.
because a lot of the
It's
things
just
you
full on the
accomplish you
dopamine train.
get right. A lot of the things you accomplish in the game actually amount to being meaningless.
But you feel
But
good doing it.
yeah, it kind of is an exercise in really understanding intrinsic motivation better. And video games actually are they have lots of transactional relationships. Like you do this, you get this. And so the idea that you do this and it was really hard and you get garbage is usually really enraging. But when the whole game is that enraging, something different happens. Um, anyway, so back in the timeline. Um, so I did defend my dissertation. So now I'm a licensed counselor. I have a PhD, and the next obvious thing I need to do is I need to have a job that requires me to have that PhD. So then I start looking for faculty positions. And so Grand Canyon University is still where I teach. They're located in Phoenix, Arizona. They have a wonderful campus, but they have a really big online counseling program. And at the time they hired me, they required all of their full time faculty to be on campus, even though it's an online program. So, you know, my call to adventure, right? My calling.
you
I have to go live
have
in
to
the desert.
pack up everything and move over.
Yeah, so I did. And then a month later they realized we don't have a good faculty to student ratio for our counseling program and nobody seems to want to move to Arizona except for Daniel and these two other people. So I guess we're going to have to stop requiring the relocation.
You think they would have
So,
known that before you moved over, but
oh, yeah. But you know what? A lot of really good things happened by me being in Phoenix for 4 years. And then the pandemic happened. Uh, Wait, we'll get to that. So, me being in Phoenix, I got to be the keynote presenter for the Arizona Division of Problem Gambling. They have a conference every year, and the research for gambling really opened the doorway for a lot of the research for gaming to start happening. For that pathological discussion of process addiction kind of phenomenology. So, I am a internationally certified gambling counselor, and I do supervision calls for that routinely, and One of my better jobs, prestige wise, that I've had was clinical director of the state gambling treatment program for Florida. Um, Somehow I told this story without even including that in proper phases of the timeline, which is really interesting to me.
Because it sounds like
But
that there's been so many of these moments in your journey
yeah,
that have kind of culminated to where you are now. For you, what are some of those more formative moments that you have had happened during your journey?
oh, sure. Well, I think that there's a handful of them that really explain how I switched from being, Dr. Kaufman, the professor and
Mhm,
licensed counselor, to becoming Dr. Gameology. And one of the most important ones is actually playing Journey at exactly the point in time when I did, when I was about to experience this kind of professional shift to where I have a PhD now. And having to believe in myself that that was a true statement.
mhm. So the
Otherwise,
whole Spider-Man analogy of with great power comes great responsibility.
yeah, and a lot of the movies are actually so impactful because the amount that he believes that statement, that Peter Parker believes that
Mhm,
statement, is not 100% all the time. And usually it's the motivation at the end for that final push
mhm,
to do the truly great thing that it takes to stop the uh the selfish presentation of bad PhD
mhm,
holders from destroying New York. I love Spider-Man so much because it's really just bad biology
mhm,
trying to destroy like the one good person that had the same bad biology happen to them. And everyone has doctorates except for Peter Parker, who just
It kind
can't
of
be
makes me
bothered
think
to attend class.
of Batman as well. Someone made like a graphic of all of the Batman villains and all of the higher education degrees that they have. It's like, ha, makes
Yeah.
you think.
Yeah, Harley Quinn is also in that category of I guess Poison Ivy too
Poison
is
Ivy, Mr.
highly
Freeze.
educated. Mr. Freeze, yeah. Wow, I never really thought of Batman that way, but
There's
yeah.
Hush. Then there's Doctor. Uh, is it not Strange? Yeah, Strange.
Yeah, Hugo
Hugo Strange.
Strange.
And I'm
Yeah,
sure I'm missing a
Arkham
few.
City. Arkham City, by the way. And I know that there's a sequel to that one, but Arkham City, the second one,
Such a good
is
game.
one of it is a masterpiece. And I just cannot get enough of that game. Oh, also somewhere along this path, so in my master's program, I mentioned Heavy Rain
Mhm.
was very important. But Devil May Cry 4 was also really important.
Okay, the two completely different games, but go on.
Yeah. So there are many difficulties in the Devil May Cry
Mhm.
games. And for whatever reason, I wasn't challenged enough in my master's program to learn counseling. And so every video game that I had, I decided at this age of my life, like 21 to 26, that I needed to platinum trophy games if they mattered to me. And often that included beating the game on every difficulty. So I had to beat Devil May Cry 4 on Dante Must Die. And then that unlocked Heaven or Hell. And then that unlocked Hell or Hell. So, Heaven or Hell, if you're not familiar, is a difficulty where they set the enemy AI to Son of Sparta, which is one step below Dante Must Die. Uh, but they can kill you in one hit. But you can kill them in one hit. So it's heaven and hell,
Mm-hmm.
right? After you beat that, you unlock hell or hell, which is they kill you in one hit, but they have the same health bar that they would have in that difficulty. So, it's a very rapid action combat, combo mashing style gameplay.
Almost like
Lots of
playing
things
a
happening.
Souls game at that point.
Yeah, just faster, but you're
Mhm,
also, um, on regular difficulties, it's okay not to be perfect.
mhm,
But on the highest ones, reaction time is everything, and you need to aim for perfection. And also, there's a combo system, or there's a rating system in play for every combat interaction in the game. So you have to link combos together, and it tells you whether your combo is a D, a C, a B, a or S, an SS, or an SSS,
mhm,
which has become actually. I have clients now that are familiar with Devil May Cry 5, which is the newest
mhm,
one, and I have had many handfuls of counseling sessions where we talk about when they have half-assed something
mhm.
and their parent has gotten on their case. And Devil May Cry actually is a great game for explaining, like, well, yeah, you did what they asked, but you did it at like a D or a C level. Like, you did it, but it was kind of trash. Like, what would happen if you brought in an effort where you're aiming for at least a double S on that?
Oh, I like that analogy where it kind of gives them this framework of the game because mainly with Devil May Cry, it's the combo, but it's also those style points of how much you
Style
gotta
points.
you're
Yep.
getting these flourish, and we can do something, but it doesn't mean that we're gonna feel good about it. But if we have those flourishes, that's where that intrinsic motivation kind of comes in. So I
Yeah.
did that, and look at what I did. I feel good about the thing.
Right. And a lot of times the gripe from, imagine an adolescent male client here who's being nagged by the parent, but rightfully so, to walk the dog. And this is their responsibility every early evening or late afternoon after school. It's not a surprise. And so they go outside with the dog for about 3 minutes, not even long enough for the dog to realize to do their business. And they come back and they're huffy about it. And maybe they roll their eyes and sigh. And they don't, like, they pretend in their session that they cannot fathom the idea of why their parent is perturbed at them.
Mhm,
And it's like, well, if this was your combo in Devil May Cry, like, yes, you did it behaviorally. Like, yes, you defeated the enemy, but they hit you a bunch of times. You didn't link your weapons together very well. You put the controller down in the middle and you checked your notifications on Instagram. Like, so your health bar is like, psh, 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 psh. And then, like, you just ended it like the game is not even something you're focused on. You're like, everything about this is I can't be bothered by this problem. So it's like, if you know something's your responsibility, maybe bring your A game into it, accomplish the goal, but do it in a way that shows that you understand the goal and that the goal matters to you. Video games teach us that it's not just Devil May Cry,
and
that
people might be
we
very
will.
surprised with how they feel after they put in that effort. And what you're mentioning makes me think to a lot of the discussions I've had with um, other mental health professionals that aren't in this mind space where they don't see the utility and the applications of these concepts, where they're
Mhm.
much more old school in the way of seeing things,
Yeah.
but that they're not necessarily speaking this current generation's language. So,
Yeah,
not saying that they're ineffective
absolutely.
therapists, they're very effective, but in a different way. They don't have that same type
Sure.
of link and connection.
Yeah. Link actually is an interesting word because I think maybe some of the things that really bring this out of us is, if any of us played Ocarina of Time, in our formative years, right? This is a game that in my own podcast, which I guess I need to fit into this story somewhere. Um, anyway, uh, I would ask the different mental health professionals that come on my show, the gaming persona, what are the games that created a change in the world for you? And far and away, the most frequently responded game is The Legend of Zelda Ocarina of Time. And it really deserves that kind of credit. It's a
It's a
wonderful game.
masterpiece.
It presents the hero's journey in a way that's compelling. It has great sense of good and evil. It has timeline stuff, which is always awesome. So it's a wonderful game, and I think that and I played that game too as a seventh or eighth grader whenever it lines up with my timeline. Um, so I think that what are the parts of my journey that made me become the Dr. Gameology thing? So, there's playing certain games during my master's program, having certain mentalities towards games, but then bringing those mentalities into what I became as a doc student. Um, the metaphor was something that I was very aware of in terms of style points by that point in time. So I definitely started investing my efforts in learning how to use video games as a way to accomplish my academic goals. So I started using Habitica on my smartphone when I was a dissertation student, and would build my streaks up doing different things for my dissertation. And I still use that app to this day. By the way, it's a
Yeah,
task management
it's a
app.
great app. I recommend it to clients in terms of like it's
Right.
getting you motivated, but you're getting all of these skill points and XP.
Yeah.
It's kind of these
Yeah.
tangible rewards that we just don't get in real life.
And my first peer reviewed publication actually was about using that to complete dissertations, gamifying the dissertation process.
Oh,
So,
I wish I would have known
you
that
know,
when I was working on my thesis because that was a slog. I only
right,
became
yeah.
aware of a lot of these things after I was done everything. It's like these things would have been great 3 years ago.
But you got where you needed to go. There could be terrible consequences of messing with the current true
Exactly.
timeline. Um, so then also my favorite publication for me is the counselor development as the hero's journey. That led to all kinds of different opportunities for me, including the journey presentation I did for Geek Therapeutics. And the idea there was not just that I wanted to talk about Journey, because I know if you haven't played Journey and someone starts talking about Journey, they look at you like you have grown two heads. It doesn't make sense. So I told Tony, Dr. Anthony
Yeah.
Bean from Geek Therapeutics, I told him, I have an idea for this presentation, and if the technology works, it's going to be amazing. And if it doesn't, then I'll just have to talk more. But I'm going to go for it. He's like, yeah, sure. If you think it's going to work, do what you need to do. And I was like, is it okay as long as I narrate the whole thing and treat it like it's a PowerPoint slide if my slides are the footage of me completing the game? He's like, you can't just show a video for an hour and give people a CEU. So I was like, no, no, no. We're not watching me play. The slide is the video that I will not be stopping and saying it's video time. And it worked. And I don't know if it's still in the version of the training that people get to watch.
It's still there.
It's, what I'm going to say. At the end I said, Tony, it worked. Like I couldn't believe that the video actually went through. Um, and like I felt parts of the conclusion of that journey as a response, like the apotheosis kind
Mm.
of moment, getting to the end and realizing that I just talked about all the stages. All I have to do is finish this last stage.
Because
There
it's
are a few.
showing this journey. Because for me, for my thesis, I talked a lot about Joseph Campbell's hero's journey and kind of the implications of it
Yeah.
within parasocial relationships. And seeing this presentation, I have the book at my office, and
Yeah.
but seeing this presentation because I played Journey back 2014, 15 when it came out ish. Like,
Mhm.
pretty much when it came out for free on PSN, on
Right,
PlayStation 2.
yeah.
That's most likely when a lot of people got it themselves. So I played it, found it good, but I don't think I was in that same type of mind space at that time that I watched your presentation on it. And it gave me this
Yeah.
like this callback of I remember all of these things and replayed the game a couple weekends ago because it's not a long game. It's like an hour and a half, two
It's an
hours.
hour and a half if you've not cleared it.
Mm.
If you have the white robe,
Yeah, because I got the white robe
which
that weekend.
yeah, the white robe allows you to instantly regenerate the scarf when you land, except for when you're in the snow.
Mm.
So that shortens the game by about 50%, actually.
So it's not a long game, but it brought back all of these concepts and linking it back to like my own journey because it's a very powerful tool of like recognizing these moments because hero's journey is this framework that most stories are built on, but everyone has a journey that they go through, and it's all
Any of
this
them.
same type of
Yeah.
framework, and we can use this concept. I think Journey just brings it out in such a beautiful visual way to use with
And auto
people.
audio. The audio for Journey
Oh, the soundtrack's amazing.
is Austin Wintory's work in that game is probably one of the most important experiences that I repeatedly get in my life. I use that soundtrack whenever big moments are about to happen, just as a kind of a meditation. My first fan convention was last year. I did PAX West.
Mm.
I went to Seattle to do a Geek Therapeutics panel on Dark Souls. And, I'd always had this idea in my head of, I want to publish something peer reviewed every year. I want to present at 5 conferences. I want to go to fan conventions. And so I got into a rhythm as a faculty member of getting the peer reviewed publications. And I got into a rhythm of getting 4 or 5 conference presentations every
Mm.
year. Um, but I never had the fan interaction, right? Like the people who love the video games. And I started to really get exhausted by having to always have the mental health professionals conversations about
Mm.
video games because they're just missing so much of the point. They're so problem focused that they don't ask the right questions.
They're focused on the problem aspect of the game rather than
Right.
the game being a tool to cope with underlying issues.
Yeah. So, when I was on the plane flying to Seattle to do this, I had Journey on my phone, which I just bought it because I have no problem throwing money at that game on any platform, always and ever. It's not an expensive game and it has changed my life. So, yeah, I'll just have it on another device. So I played it on the plane and like had a moment at the end because the plane landed about 10 minutes after I finished it. And I just realized, like, again, in one more way than was true yesterday. I became what I set out to do.
The
And I think
I
that's
made it.
right. Yeah. The posters for that game and the final song on the soundtrack is titled I Was Born for This. And I don't think everyone on this earth believes that statement, but I think it would change a lot for the good if they tried to. I really do believe defining what that sentence means is what my job is when I work with people. Is I'm going to say a sentence and you're going to tell me what it means. And then everything we do after that is about you making it true. And I think that's what the monomyth is about. It's about metaphor and archetype and symbolism and being able to see in our own limited world that doesn't rely on gods and magic and mythical beasts, but it's about, going to work, leveling up our skills and relating to other people in our surroundings. That the symbolism is we need to defeat the mythical creatures. We need to find the aids amongst the people that want to see us succeed. We need to acquire the boon and become the master of both worlds. And so, back to my story as a child and a high schooler and a college student, and just seeing that there is a problem with mental health and people are looking for help. That's the ordinary world. The herald of change and the mentor and the call to adventure are all just what you gonna do.
I
And
actually used that in Journey with a client a few weeks ago, where the client is the dad, and he was talking about his son that kind of has like this element of failure to thrive in his early 20s and is just stuck. Goes to
mhm,
school, doesn't really thrive, doesn't really go to school, uses drugs, and they're a really good family, good household, and they've given him all of these tools, which is kind of that same point in Journey that you kind of fall down into the pit where
yeah.
you gain all of these tools, then what?
The interaction between the mentor and the traveler in Journey, there's no words in the whole game.
Mm,
So you have to, if you want to understand it this way, you have to break open Hero with a Thousand Faces
mm,
or look at the song titles on the
mm,
soundtrack and understand what the glances mean. But there is one scene between them when you finish a stage where the mentor just kind of nods, which is basically, I'm not going with you there. It's kind of like you're done with your master's program, your
mm,
internship is over. You get to go counsel people, but in that building, I'm not going to be there.
mm. You have these
Um,
skills and you've proven yourself that you are capable.
right. And so, I mean, this game is it's a metaphor that really helps to connect the idea of this mythical quest that I think we can become more alive if we believe that we're in it. Um, not actually believe it, but the kind of imagination that's not really encouraged by CBT. And we're coming full circle on so many levels right
Yeah.
now, but I've really become drawn because of games like Journey and because of Joseph Campbell, which is not reading in a mental health oriented program. But it's really helped me to realize that I'm more at home in narrative therapy. I'm more at home in existential therapy. And the way these were packaged and promoted to me as a learner, there was nothing for me in those.
Mhm,
Like I never as a student sitting in a chair listening to a lecture thought I could really do good things with narrative therapy.
mhm,
And yet I do every day, just bringing Star Wars back into it, I explained to a client with a little bit of back and forth, but we were running short on time. So I really just kind of hit home a couple ideas that if you only watch the original trilogy, Darth Vader is the traditional perspective of what addiction is.
Mhm.
That he's evil, he deliberately chose to be evil, he's powerfully evil, and we need to fear it.
Mhm.
But if you add the prequels to it, you get the idea of shame and oh crap, what did I just do? And chasing losses.
Mhm.
And well, everybody thinks I'm evil, so
Might as well just
I
become
guess
evil.
I guess I'm evil. And that, just F it mentality is usually what I'm treating in sessions. It's not the story of addiction that is this is an evil moral choice. It's morally bad choice, I should say. That model doesn't work. It doesn't work for me, and I don't think it actually works at all. I think that, empathy and being a person that can start showing that connections are possible with other people. And you don't understand what Darth Vader is, the way the story's been told,
Mhm.
post prequel era. Like the end of Return of the Jedi is a completely different ending than it was for me as a child,
Mhm.
right? Um, and maybe it was always there, but I just think when you understand what the dark side is with the context of the original trilogy and the prequel trilogy, you're in a much better spot to become a good counselor.
Mhm. It creates this journey that you can see Anakin go from this young boy and down this path being
Yeah.
conflicted. And then it's something that I often use with my clients is a quote from René Descartes, which is, I think, therefore I am.
Mm-hmm.
But the flip side of that is if I hear something often enough, then it must be true.
Mm.
So
Yeah.
him just internalizing that with what Dark Sidious was saying and everything that he then held on to of I am bad. I Everyone tells me that I'm bad. Everyone believes that I'm bad. I'm just going to be that
Mm-hmm.
until his redemption in Return of the Jedi,
Yeah.
where that
It really
innocent
does.
boy really comes out again.
Yeah. It also hits home that, the every phase of our hierarchy of needs, from Maslow or more complex versions of that are important, including belonging, including self-esteem, agency, autonomy. And if you convince people that these things are met in ways that are dysfunctional and they believe that that's how you meet them, that that's their normal, you end up with problems, and our fictions and our stories are creative and imaginative ways to learn all of these things actually, but without having to watch a real person suffer. And I
It's
think that
that
that's
distancing that we can have.
yeah. And I think that that's why I start to see movies and games and comics and superheroes the way that I do. And I've really enjoyed becoming, Dr. Gameology. It took the game streaming that I started to do as a doc student, and then the podcasting. Eventually I became for 2 years a co-host for Utini Cast, which was another full circle moment. But then I stopped playing SWTOR also, and switched to Final Fantasy 14. But that led to the Gaming Persona podcast, which was really me just kind of taking this idea that games can be a foundational part of how we see the world. Who do we become when we play games? And so, me and my co host, we talk about that supposedly every week. Not really, but as close to every week as we can. And, so I've been able to activate a lot of the things that I was hoping I would be just by, it's a long story. It's hard to include everything actually. It's really challenging to do this
Yeah.
conversation. Um,
But what we're talking
but
about is, and one thing that I think a lot of people don't understand or may not be aware of, that as mental health professionals, we're people too, that we have lives outside of our office. And it just shows with some of the things that we're doing here that we're kind of bridging our personal lives and our professional lives in the hopes of helping people in a different way. So, what are some of the things that, other than being a mental health professional, that you do that you're passionate about?
um, well, I have a son. He was born during my master's program. So, now at this point, he's a teenager. So it's been really fun to play games with him, um, and watch wrestling with him. That's like our go-to thing also, which is a whole other part of my childhood that I didn't even talk about. But I really I think that it's just really neat to see him be in the phase of life where so many of the things that I talked about in this show started to happen, and just kind of think about from that context, have that generational kind of understanding that he's not what he's going to become yet, but some of that is there, and I wonder which of those things are. um I still really love playing video games, but even when I stream them or play them, I'm still always thinking, how does this fit into the overall thing that I am? There's no switch that I have to flip to really jump in and start doing a counseling session. That is not a compartmentalization that I have. You're basically talking to the person that would do a therapy session with you right now.
I think
So,
that's what makes a very authentic therapist, where you don't have this switch. And I've talked
yeah.
to some therapists in the past where they're one way in a counseling session and a completely different way outside of that room. But being able to kind of
Yeah.
meld those things, and it brings me to a theory that I use all the time, which is self-discrepancy theory from Tory Higgins, of the true self, ought self, ideal self. And the more
Mhm.
separate they are, the more distressed we become, but the more you can just unify them as to this one person, then the more comfortable you become. And I use this reference with my clients a lot of, I'm a huge nerd and a huge geek, as you can see the stuff behind me. That this is my home office, but I have some stuff at my own like practice that I'm starting to bring in to just show out that side. And one thing that for me is, I always have like nerdy socks. This
Mm.
doesn't kind of, I have like the shirt and the pants and the suit jacket, but I have these socks where it just helps me bring out that personality of me.
Yeah.
I'm a person too. I have these interests, and we can use these things to work in this narrative.
Yeah, I used to really worry about, people are paying me to be a counselor and I need to look like their idea of what a counselor is. So like
Full blown
I
perceived not self.
right, I'd have the work shirt, like what you would wear when you go to work as a
Mhm.
counselor. And I have a pop-up green screen right over there. It's really awesome. My webcam is it's a virtual cam. I can change it so that I'm just, you know, of
Mhm.
course the blue streamer lights are interfering with the effect, and I'm not using a green screen.
Mhm.
But if I were, I would perfectly look like I'm in this proper counselor's office. But I slowly started to realize that I am a counselor. I'm a really good counselor, and the things behind me, they represent so much of why that's true, right? Like you can't see all of it, and I know the room is blue,
Mhm.
but I
So I
just
see a
want to
TARDIS. Is
the
that a white
TARDIS,
mage
yes.
in the back?
It's Gandalf, but
Okay,
yeah.
Gandalf.
I do have do or do not. There is no try
Mhm.
underneath the clock. The clock is journey. So on the hands are the traveler,
Okay.
and the numbers are the little cubes
Mhm.
of the names. And the mountain. I have shadow boxes of Link claiming the Master Sword in Link to the Past, and I have the Pokemon selection in Pokemon Yellow, where Professor Oak is saying every journey begins with a choice.
Mhm.
Um, and my degree and the books that are in my behind me are just they're like I have a bookcase right over there.
Mhm.
The books that get to go there are the books you would have to read to become me.
Mhm. Those are those
Um,
special books that just differentiate you from everyone else.
yes, right. And so I just slowly like I sometimes I do go get the work shirt, but like I don't button it. Like
Mhm.
so I'm dressed like I'm at work, but I'm also like a black mage in Final Fantasy
Mhm.
14, and if that's a problem, there's all kinds of boring counselors you can find on Psychology Today that
Mhm.
are probably cheaper than me. So have fun with that. Um I just started to realize that I don't have a huge caseload. My practice is not huge. The people who chose me because
For a reason.
I'm wearing a black mage shirt and I have a wizard staff behind my head. So I just sort of, geek therapy um, as a concept and geek therapeutics as a company has really helped me to understand that these are not counseling mistakes that I enjoy making. These are really smart counseling choices that, if I'm accepting the kinds of clients that I can serve the best, I should make those choices. And um, it's really helped. Um, there are reckless ways, that are bordering on, mistakes or countertransference where you're doing things more for yourself than for the process that you're
Mhm.
serving. But I think that I was so rigid, probably because of that, cognitive behavioral background. This is
Mhm.
what therapy looks like. You better
This is
do it
how it
right.
works.
Yeah. And every 3 or 4 months, something new happens that just reminds me that people ask you to do this stuff because you do all that stuff well enough to stay in the game, but you bring this into the room. So anyone who's listening to, the episode today, I just hope, if you are also mental health professionals, I guess that would be the
Mhm.
target audience, just think about yourself in that framework. That's what geek therapy is all about, but that's also what our congruence relies on as well. Is, you as a person decided to become this. And you as a person are this when you start being able to work with clients. So how do you, I think it's important for avoiding burnout. I also think it's important for us to remember that we probably help more people reach their sense of self-fulfillment when we are pursuing our sense of self-fulfillment too.
So, self care, being sure that we're taking care of ourselves, which leads me to this last point of what are some of the things that you do and that you're working on that you would want everyone to know or that you can talk about?
Yeah, so I'm working on a book right now that I I don't know exactly how much to say about what the book is, but I do strongly feel that if you listen to this episode, you might be able to deduce what it is. Um,
I don't want
I
to
have the
approach you.
gaming
You put
person.
yourself in trouble. So,
Ha ha ha. Really, really, all it is about being able to advance it to a stage where there's all the things in place that make it a done deal, right? There's the Gaming Persona podcast where we pick different topics based on research studies that are coming out or have been out. And the idea is to present those to mental health professionals or parents or people that enjoy the psychology of games and kind of have a conversation that doesn't require you to sit down and read the journal article. I will do that for you. And doesn't require you to understand the game. I will do my best to do that for you too. Unless it's Wordle, I outsourced understanding Wordle to my co-host. Um, that's funny to me. Um, I stream on Twitch at Dr.Gameology, and I actually will have a website coming out hopefully by the end of this month where I'll be doing some blog posts to also present ideas about games from a psychological perspective where I can do kind of smaller micro conversations like, what does BioShock have to say about the inner depths of the psyche? And just
ooh,
write,
that's going to be interesting.
just
That's
well, no,
a
just
great series.
yeah, absolutely. The lighthouse is the wait, that picture
Yeah.
where the wizard is. I always get mixed. I would never be a weatherman. I can't point at things behind me. Um, yeah, so just random things like that. Blog posts that are not exhaustive. 500 or 1,500 words would do it, but just have things that wouldn't be a full podcast episode, but I want the conversation to come from Dr. Gameology. Um, I think that there are a lot of things that I do and hope to do that I'll continue to just be available as part of the community. And one of the coolest things that I think eventually led to this episode is just running into each other at that PAX West. I visited the Guardians mental health table, and I got both of you on the show for the gaming persona, and now we're here. I really enjoy that aspect a lot.
It's making these
Is
connections and growing this community.
exactly, and also a lot of the people that I read their work, and their work was really important for certain assignments or presentations. Like I get to talk to those people now, and that's probably one of the most validating circle is complete kind of things. So I hope that if I continue doing things in a way that fulfills me and sharing it with people, maybe I'll be that person for someone, that I pursued being a faculty and doctorate in education of counselors because I just wanted to be Qui-Gon Jinn and find my Obi-Wan.
Mhm.
Not taking Qui-Gon's fate into account,
No,
obviously.
true.
But, that's just really what I'm pursuing always is I just want to help other people love psychology and conversations about mental health as much as I do. And video games.
And these are all important things, and we can't wait to see what you're going to be coming up with. And I can't wait to read that book when it finally does come out. And I want to thank you for joining us tonight. I know that this conversation and so many others need to be had with so many people. And I just want to thank you for just joining us and continuing this narrative that one, mental health professionals are people. We have our own journeys, but we can use these elements that have helped formed us so we can help people in different ways. So
Absolutely.
again, everyone, thank you for joining and listening. Um, Hopefully next week we'll be back with another episode. I think we're going to be on Tuesday, and this month being Mental Health Awareness Month, we're going to be doing a lot of things with Guardians MH to push this narrative of how important mental health is and how we can work on making or hoping to make everyone better and have a better mental health. So, again, thank you for joining, and I wish everyone a good evening.